All right, good evening. Tonight, we're going to be dealing with the nitty-gritty of the actual night of the Seder, or as it is called, the order for the of Pesach, of the holiday of Passover. While there are several tapes that are essential in understanding the entire concept, and without which this order, or the understanding of the order of the Pesach, naturally from a Kabbalistic point of view, will not have the same kind of significance. So I urge you that you understand and listen to those 5 tapes again, while everyone assumes that they've heard it once, they've heard it, and that's sufficient. It's not. It requires review, and this evening is actually going to be based on a certain amount of knowledge that everyone has already acquired. As much as I have made an attempt in the past 25 years to kind of explode the myth surrounding the night of Passover, just to name a few, the myth of Passover is a family gathering. In other words, it's the one night in the year where people should get together with their families, be together. And there is somewhat of a justification. I don't want to completely discount it. The origin of that myth, and the reason I call it a myth, because it turned into something else. It turned into just a family affair without taking into account the significance of what this night of Passover is all about. But during the time of the Exodus, each family took a lamb, slaughtered the lamb, and each family would participate in that particular lamb. So you might say, and no one should eat from any other family's lamb. In other words, it would indicate on the surface that this was a family get-together. But as I mentioned before, today, for those who still observe the night of Passover, not the majority certainly have no connection with it. But even those who do get together because of this family reunion idea have nevertheless forgotten the real significance of what we want to accomplish that night, that particular night of Passover, what we hope to accomplish, and what was the purpose originally. So it is really not something that is connected with a family affair. Secondly, I've made an attempt overall throughout the years to dispel any idea that this night of Passover is for traditional purposes. Because from a Kabbalistic point of view, there is no such thing as tradition. And if there is amongst some of us this idea that tradition is very much alive, I would suggest that you see Fiddler on the Roof again, and that might reinforce your beliefs in tradition. But from a Kabbalistic point of view, I see no significance in the aspect of tradition. Because while it may have been a wonderful thing for the Jews who once were in bondage to achieve independence, for those who live in free countries and enjoy independence, what is more to be achieved? Shall we say, well, if our forefathers had not gotten out of Egypt, had not become independent, had not participated in the exodus from slavery, then we might, as the Agada says, so we think, we might still be slaves in Egypt. But, as I mentioned in the tapes, if it was really that bad, if things were really going so terrible for the Jews who were in Egypt, I can't believe that throughout the Bible there would be constant repetitions and pleas by the Jews, pleas, P-L-E-A-S, to return to Egypt if it was really that terrible. When you never go back to a place that has bad memories. And if Egypt meant bad memories, then why would the Jew, throughout the Bible, always remind Moses when he was not, let's say, kowtowing to their demands and their needs, by their threatening him that let us go back to Egypt if it was that terrible. So obviously, the Exodus is not what plays an important role in all of this that we observe. Furthermore, it is called the holiday of Passover. Passover, and the time that it is mentioned, is more closely related to the aspect of the angel of death passed over the Jews. In other words, the firstborn of the Egyptians were slaughtered that evening. But over the houses of the Jews, the angel of death passed over. So why are we calling it Passover? You mean the firstborn of the Jews was spared. What does that have to do with the Exodus? What is the connection to the Exodus? We should call it the holiday of freedom. We should even call it the holiday of matzah, just as we call the other holidays like Sukkot, the holiday of Sukkah, because that is what's left in tradition. That is what's left in tradition. But we call it Pesach, call it Passover. And yet the fundamental idea behind Passover, from a ritual point of view at least, is the eating of matzah. So it should be called Chag HaMatzot. And it's not called Chag HaMatzot, it's called Chag HaPesach. The name, the overall name. And then it shouldn't even be called Pesach or Passover. It should be called Chag HaChirut, the holiday of freedom, which is what we are led to believe was the significant aspect of this evening. And if there are any other ideas of what Pesach is about, meaning for an observant Jew, then for him, Passover is, well, once the Bible declares that you must observe this holiday of Passover, so then there is an obligation on all Jews to fulfill this precept. It is one of those 613 precepts. And so there is really no significance in its observance, other than the fact, like one keeps Shabbat. The reason he keeps Shabbat, because in the Torah it says, I'm speaking now from a conventional point of view, you keep Shabbat. Now, for those Jews, it says keep Passover, so you keep Passover. So obviously, from the tone of my voice, we are not agreeing or even ascending down to that level of understanding of what this significant night of Pesach is all about. Briefly stated, what happened on Pesach was that in essence the Jews were not entitled to leave. Not only were they not entitled, frankly, they didn't even want to go out. So it has nothing to do with the aspect of freedom. One of the reasons, says the Zohar, why the Jew did not want to leave Egypt is because he was closely related to the metaphysical dominion of the Egyptians. According to the Zohar, how did the Egyptians control the then known world? And we know that the Middle Kingdom, incidentally, was like the later empires, Roman Empire, Babylonian Empire, Persian Empire. All of these empires ruled over the then known world. And Egypt, in the Middle Kingdom, at the time of the Exodus, also ruled over all peoples of the world at that time. And the Zohar tells us, how did they rule? Because they connected with the negative energy of the desire to receive for oneself alone. And so it was quite simple for them to have people follow them, not even as a ruler, but as a leader. And that's what Pharaoh really was for peoples of the world. Whereas the subsequent empires achieved their dominance as victors over the lands they conquered. With Egypt, there was no problem. They had the power by which they could satisfy the desire to receive for all peoples of the world for themselves alone. They were enjoying that kind of metaphysical satiation. And so if that's what they were enjoying, then why should they leave? And therefore, Egypt had no problem ruling without an army the entire world, as opposed to the subsequent empires that required military presence to assure their dominion over those particular lands. Therefore, what the power of the Egyptian, and which was symbolized by their pyramid, as you know, the pyramid is almost an opposite or an exact duplicate of the Magen David, but in reverse form. If you notice that the pyramid starts from the top and goes down and spreads down towards the earth, if you've seen pictures of the pyramids, and broadens its base as it approaches earth. If you notice the bottom of the Magen David, the bottom of the Star of David, it comes to a point and spreads upwards. Now, from a Kabbalistic point of view, that it becomes quite apparent the difference between the Star of David and the pyramids. The pyramids were trying to increase and broaden the base of Mother Earth. What is Mother Earth? What is the characteristic of Mother Earth? The desire to receive for oneself alone. That is called, in other terms, gravitation. The Star of David is the opposite. Star of David, which symbolizes, and this is what the Jew should represent for the nations of the world, is the opposite idea of desire to receive for oneself alone, but rather the idea of restriction. The idea of restriction, meaning the opposite principle of which was fostered by the Egyptians. Along comes the Jew with a new philosophy that there must be another purpose of all peoples existing on earth other than just to keep taking and taking and taking. The Jew came when? During Passover, with the idea, the first time, that there was an idea of the restriction. That restriction also is represented by the segol, by the three-pointed vowel, 2 dots, and the bottom, you have 3 dots. So when we asked, why is this holiday called Passover? And that is the significant aspect of all that transpired during the holiday of Pesach. The answer lies because, if you recall, that Passover, the reason why the angel of death passed over the Jewish homes and not the Egyptian homes is because they had put the blood on 3 parts of the doorpost. 3 parts of the doorpost. And when the angel of death saw the 3 parts of the doorpost, he passed over. But the reason is, why did he pass over? We know that there is another rule. Once the angel of death, and this is the way we explain how righteous people in the Holocaust also died, because predominantly there were most people were not of the finest kind, the Jews, but because the angel of death was given permission to proceed with what purpose he had come to Europe, even those who are righteous he couldn't pass over because he was given permission. Here he was given permission, the same kind of permission. We know this from the Zohar, when there was a plague one day and Rabbi Shimon told his students, do not go outside, because once the angel of death has been given permission to proceed with his objective, then anyone in his path is going to suffer the same consequence. If that be the case, then why here did the angel of death pass over, if they had permission to smite the firstborn? The answer, says the Zohar, because that representation of the blood was not merely a representation of the blood. When he saw the blood, he disappeared, but rather that those 3 doorposts and being sprinkled by the blood represented the segol, the 3 parts, and those 3 parts, with the meditation of the Jew at that time, that they were going to accept the principle of restriction. In other words, they were going to go out. They were going to go out from the bondage of the desire to receive for oneself alone, but wish to become a nation of free choice, because desire to receive for oneself alone, as we know, is embedded at the time of birth. This is Rabbota consciousness. Everybody naturally is born with an instinct of self-preservation. It is not something you have to learn, not something you have to acquire, but it is something we are born with. Along comes the Jew and says, that is Rabbota consciousness. Then what is the purpose of all peoples being on earth if all it is to be born with a desire to receive for oneself alone as self-preservation and no other purpose? Then we are robots. Was that the purpose? To be born, to be robots and die. Along came Passover, and the Jews were told that you are preparing, or we are preparing you for a particular objective in this universe. For the first time, a nation is going to represent the purpose of why we were created in the first place. And that is not to be robots. And the only way we can demonstrate an aspect of free will was the act of restriction. The act of restriction is the only prerogative that mankind, all of mankind, has in demonstrating his free will. Because if he just moves along the path of least resistance and moves with the tide, moves with the way things are going, without restriction, because it is only restriction that requires an effort. Nothing else requires an effort. To go into a store and buy bread and preserve yourself with food and so forth doesn't require effort. It is a normal, instinctive part of our life's procedure. It is only when suddenly we have a need, and at that moment we say, wait a second. While that need is very pressing, but what is my purpose here? To demonstrate that I am not part of robotic consciousness. In other words, if I If suddenly my clothes tear, it is a natural instinct for me to go out and buy clothing. That is not a decision I have made. It is a decision that has been thrust upon me. And then even the clothes I wear are designer's clothes. Even the decision what kind of clothes I'm going to wear is not even my own decision. So if we look around us, by and large, in 99% of our activity, we live in the pyramidical robot type of consciousness. Self-preservation, whatever is necessary, we do it as a robot. But for the moment that we can enact and we can instill an act of restriction, that requires free will. So the reason why it is called Passover and why that is the most significant aspect, not the eating of the matzah, not going out of Egypt, as I mentioned before, the Jews each time said, Moses, take us back to Egypt. You know how good it was there. Now, why am I to believe that the Jews had it bad there when the Bible itself states very clearly that the Jews time and time again requested for Moses, take us back to the good food that was in Egypt, the good times that were in Egypt. But when did they demand the return to Egypt? When things got a little rough. When things were not going according to a robotic consciousness lifestyle. And there were demands or responsibilities placed on the Jew. That's when he took cover and said, look, let's go back where it was very comfortable, where there were no demands, where we could live our life as a robotic consciousness way of life. And there was nothing wrong with that. Therefore, nothing was as important as the passing over. But it didn't mean the fact that they were saved from the angel of death. That is what we celebrate, because that wasn't important. First of all, the only ones who would have been saved would have been the firstborn. The rest of the Jews would have remained alive. But what was significant in that word Pesach was, for the first time, a nation as a whole, not only an Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and the sons of Jacob, demonstrated free will, but a nation as a whole, for the first time, were brought into a consciousness of free will, that free will existed, that we did not have to flow with the tide. And of course, as we know, the tide does not mean easy flowing at all times. There is always the ups and downs of a tide, the problems of illness, the problems of other aspects of life that always bring with it the hardships. Here the Jews were going to be taught a method by which they could exact free will into their cosmic consciousness and thereby become free people. This is why it's called Passover. But we are also told at the same time that the Jews were told that if you want to be free from the angel of death, do an act of the 3-column system. However, says the Zohar, these people did not achieve that kind of consciousness. Look, self-preservation. They're still in that idea of, if it means I'll be saved, if I do this, I'll do it. I'll do anything as long as to preserve myself. But to say that they were ready or that they were even prepared to accept the principle of free will is another matter. They were told that if you do an aspect of the 3-column, the angel of death will pass over. But they, by and within themselves, did not in 1 minute achieve a consciousness of free will. That had to be achieved. Because while the angel of death could not smite the firstborn, nevertheless, what about achieving a permanency of free will. How was that going to be achieved? Overnight, as we know, one does not acquire a spiritual elevation of consciousness because he says, I want. Not enough. You've got to work for it. So the Zohar says, this night of Passover, the Jew would never have achieved freedom. He would have achieved, let's say, freedom of the angel of death. All he did was sprinkle the three sides of the doorpost. That would have achieved freedom from the firstborn being smitten and dying from the angel of death. However, to have achieved free will, to have gone out of robotic consciousness, inasmuch as they had not achieved any spiritual elevation or any spiritual understanding or any spiritual consciousness, they were no less and no more like the Egyptians, wholly dedicated to one idea, the desire to receive for oneself alone. How would they break out from this bondage? What happens, says the Zohar, and it's only from the Zohar that we understand these things, but it fits in, is the idea that the light that existed at the time of creation, before the sin and fall of Adam. The light. And what light am I talking about? I'm talking about the light that if we were to close and put this room, close the lights, and place this room in total darkness, we know from what we study in the morning in the Talmud Sfirot that light is present. It is only an illusion that we do not see the light present in the room, and the light that seems to appear with the flipping of a switch is not light that these instruments, physical instruments, provide us with, but rather they are instruments and channels by which they reveal the light that was there in the first place before we even flipped the switch. So light is present at all times. And so there are some people who can get the feeling of a room even if there's total darkness. Some people who can feel the presence of people in a room where there's total darkness, despite the fact that physically one cannot observe what's going on. That light that was present before the fall of Adam, because the illusion came after the eating of the apple by Adam, but before his eating of the apple, there was light present. Without these instruments, there was a total light emanating throughout the world, and it was lost with the fall of Adam. This night of Passover, because God understood that they had almost achieved, the 50 gates of darkness, they had achieved a consciousness of a desire to receive for oneself alone that was almost complete, and then there would be no purpose for their existence in this world, no purpose for the world to continue existence. They would have achieved a totality of robotic consciousness, which is what we call the Dark Lord, the Dark Force, the force that prevents people from doing anything outside of what they are being told to do, what they are being compelled to do. And I don't want to repeat again, but we've gone through several years of understanding how almost all peoples live in a robotic state of consciousness. I'm not asking all of you to accept this kind of statement, but it can be proven time and time again. For the most part, people react in a robotic state of consciousness. They do not exercise free will. It might appear to them as an illusion that they are exercising free will. But if they were exercising free will, and if we were in so much control of our state of affairs and how calm the state of affairs of the universe, our own personal lives, how many of us escape the traumas of a business, the traumas of illness, the traumas of family life, how many escape from all of it? If we were in total control, then why can't we control all of our problems if we're really in total control? So it is only an imbecile that does not stop for a moment to take account of himself and say, how much of my life is really under my control? When there is total darkness, meaning there is total robotic consciousness, which also means the totality of the desire to receive for oneself alone, there is no free will, and everything is governed by the cosmos. 1 month is good, 1 month is bad, and 1 day is good, 1 day is bad. So we have our ups and downs. We think these ups and downs are the makings and doings of our own activity, and that is a total mistake. Because if everyone sat down and decided to take a log, I'm not talking about someone who has achieved the level of consciousness to understand that restriction becomes the major part of his life. But for the most part, if everyone would take a log, they would see that the same things happen on the same dates of the week. They would see that the same things happen the same months of the year as every other months of every year, succeeding year, and preceding year, and etc. To indicate to us beyond any shadow of a doubt that what we believe is free will, what we believe is a freedom of consciousness, is a total illusion and fabrication. So the Jew was there, and he would have remained in that state of robotic consciousness. He would have remained beyond, in a condition beyond where he could control his environment, his physical health and well-being, and so forth and so forth. God seeing this, we are told, according to the Zohar, realized that either the world should come to an end and start all over with. So then again, people would have to be born, Adam would have to come back again, would try it again, and so forth and so on. Rather than start the entire procedure over again, at one time in history, and only in one time in history, according to the Zohar and according to the Bible, God produced the events before the fall of Adam, when there was total light, when there was total freedom, because light means freedom, darkness, we're now connecting and associating with the desire to receive for oneself alone, which means robotic consciousness. While this freedom, while this control over our lives, while this control over our environment can only be achieved when we are in a frame and state of freedom of consciousness. The Jew was not. That existed before, when Adam had a pure chance, a pure choice, either to eat or not to eat. Today, for the most part, with so much negativity around, there is sometimes so little room left for us not to move according to the demands of society, demands of our environment, demands of our family, demands of our business partners, demands of what we wear, demands of what we ride with, demands how we dress, demands how we talk, all demands from outside of ourselves, never really demonstrating our own free will, like it was before Adam sinned. When God saw this condition and this situation on Passover, he said that while I will again restore the world with full of light, the same light that existed before the fall of Adam, meaning he took away our free will, but he didn't take away our free will. He now restored us to a position where there was no overabundance of negative activity. We were living now in Gan Eden. For that one moment in time, that one day in time, at the Exodus, the light shone, we were now in Gan Eden, and everything would have been perfect. Had that condition, in fact, even existed, we would be in total control of not only our own private lives, not only of our own physical and mental welfare, but of the entire environment and surrounding society. That's what happened the night of Passover. That was demanded. The conditions in which the Jews found themselves required that kind of freedom, and that they would never have ever removed themselves from a state of Rabboni consciousness. This is what the night of Passover is about. To connect and to make an association and to become again an individual that could begin to control our lives and everything around us. The sages and the Torah brought us not a tradition, not a new mitzvah, as if we didn't have enough, not a remembrance that the Jews were once slaves and now they're free, and therefore we observe it because they went free. Shouldn't we, like a July 4th, celebrate the Declaration of Independence? Right? After all, if our forefathers hadn't fought for the freedom, we wouldn't have it. Had they not gone out of Egypt, we might still be slaves in Egypt. That is not the reason. The reason, because our celebration of July 4th does not, I believe, in any way enhance our consciousness, enhance our health, enhance our environment, enhance my position in society, gives me more wealth, gives me more happiness, gives me more everything else. July 4th, nobody claims does that. And anyone celebrating Passover for that reason, I would like one individual throughout this world to stand up and say, I did the tradition, and now I feel a complete transformation. Nobody. What was the difference? The only thing is we're saying, thank you, God, for releasing our forefathers from bondage. Therefore, I'm no longer a slave. But the next day, he's back into slavery, into that robotic state of consciousness, no control over his life, etc., etc. So this is what really happened on Passover, and this is what the Torah really wants to assist us with, as Rabbi Shimon says. Forget the religious bit. Forget that there is religion. The Zohar says God, when he gave us the Torah, gave us eitzot. He gave us instruments by which to assist us. You know where the word eitzah comes from, the root called etz. Tree. What does tree have to do with advice? In Hebrew. What is the connection? Oh, if you want to say etz hachayim, or the tree of life, the tree grows upwards, and malchut, as we know, that level of robotic consciousness, the lowest level, the earth level, is where you have no control. So, when the Torah gives us eitzot, it is presenting ideas by which we can drag ourselves out of the mud, out of the swamp, out of a helplessness state. And again, the proof has to be in the pudding. Proof has to be in the pudding. This is only a preacher or a rabbi that tells you if you're good, God will bless you, and if you're bad, God will punish you. And none of us really believe it. You know why we really don't believe it? Because we look around ourselves. Look around. What do you find? Only blessings. Because God is good. Could there be anything but blessings? So if we are all convinced about blessings, then we can really stop the session this evening, I have nothing more to offer you. As long as you're all perfectly happy and content, you're in total control of your lives and your health and your well-being and so forth. But I'm assuming that maybe we have all gathered here tonight for the express purpose of maybe we're not that happy, or even if we are happy, we want to achieve a little more than what we have. So we don't have the ultimate. This is what Passover is about. And how we can connect to that gift that was given to a nation of people that were absolutely not entitled to that kind of gift, because they were aspiritual, not only because the Zohar says they were aspiritual, but because the way the Torah talks about those people of the Exodus, while they were the Dor Dayah, they were the generation of information that no other generation until, of course, says the Zohar, the generation of the age of Aquarius, has ever achieved as much information as the Dor Dayah. And with all of this information, they still want to go back to Egypt. So, what we want to achieve tonight is an understanding, but a more deeper significance. When I say deeper significance, meaning if you read through the Haggadah, if you read through it, to tell you that you may not have made your connections, and maybe you have, why leave things in an uncertain state? If we have the opportunity through the Zohar and through the Ari to make certain that what the Jews captured and what was necessary for freedom, what we're talking about freedom, we are talking about freedom to whatever extent of achieving an advancement in every aspect of our own personal lives. Maybe we can't achieve all of it. Maybe there's a prior incarnation that limits us to the extent that we can achieve something. But according to the Zohar and according to the Ari, if we can connect to that light, our lives should be somewhat better, at least, than it was the previous year. And because this takes place, as you know, in the month of Aviv, the month of Aries, and the month of Nisan, the month of war, which is Mars, all of these factors were put together that if we can come in control of these cosmic effects, which is war, of Madim, which is Taleh, which is Aries, and you know already from the tapes that the significance of Aries spells out only one thing: desire to receive for oneself alone. I don't know if I mentioned this in the tape, but many years ago, I wanted to know why was this month referred to as Aries. You know, the lambs. What's wrong with them? They're quiet. They don't make any problems for anybody. They can even become domesticated to an extent. What's so bad? So I had no other choice but to go to the zoo and see what the Aries was about. So then I'm watching. Oh, there they are, harmless animals, really harmless animals. Until the zookeeper came with the food. Zookeeper came with the food. And he put the food down here and here and here. And there should be food for everybody, right? And there was enough food for all of the lambs that were there. But lo and behold, I see one lamb charges into another lamb in another part of their habitat and chases him away. And he goes back and continues to eat. I thought maybe he wanted to take his bundle of hay, take it back, and eat it. No. He went back to his bundle of hay and kept eating. This other lamb comes back, and this is exactly where I saw it. Comes back and begins to eat again. The other one sees him, comes charging in with his horns at him, and he runs away. And this kept on going the whole time. He never finished his the amount of hay, the first Aries that he never finished it. Then I realized, here's the Jew of the destruction of the temple. Here is the Jew throughout, the Sinat Chinam Jew. I mean, what's bothering you? Something lacking? No, but why does he have also? Right?
Harrison, in Harrison we have the same thing. We need the priest to protect us, and we need Jews to get us
Out of Harrison. Okay. All right. This is the Aries. This is the Aries. So this was the month that all of these negative qualities, all of these negative energy intelligences were to be brought under our control. And because these forces direct our activities. Make no mistake that we are governed by and large by astral activities, and it is somewhere along the line we should be given an opportunity to be able to overcome these negative activities and demonstrate our own free will. So therefore, they instituted the Haggadah, and that each part of this Haggadah is geared to the connection of that infusion of light that night, and only that night of Pesach. It never happened again, but it happened once. And we know that once some event becomes part of cosmic history, it always reappears again at that particular time. Of the Hebrew calendar, because only in the lunar calendar, with of course the addition of the months, does the holiday of Passover always occur during the dominion of Mars and Aries. Now there are essentially 15 stages. 15 stages on how to make this connection on this night of Passover. Why are there 15 stages? Why not 14? Why not 16? But they are in all of your see here. In fact, in this one, they tell you there's only 14. Maybe there's only 14, but most of them have 15. But he says it could be 14. So the only reason I chose this one was because of the picture. But let me assure you, there are 15. So I guess this is the one you shouldn't buy. Huh? This is the one that they use?
Missing the triangle of the lower part also.
What's that?
The lower part of the triangle is one more part than also.
Oh, you mean because they only have 5 over here? You mean where is the Star of David?
Motzi and Matzah they put together. That's why it's 14.
Yes. Yeah. Motzi. No, it doesn't say Motzi u'Matzah. It says Motzi Matzah. Right. And that should be 2, because they are absolutely 2 separate and distinct stages, totally unrelated one to the other. Right. Yeah, there's a motzi, and then there would be 15. All right? But there are 15. Now the question is, why are there 15? And we know why we want to know, because the more knowledge we have, the greater is the connection, because the knowledge is your connection. Why is knowledge your connection? Why is knowledge your connection? It was like a few days ago, we had a seminar in Los Angeles, so I'm encouraging everybody to buy the Zohar. That's my idea of how, if we can only bring everybody to be happy, then I know immediately too many wars won't happen, too many muggings won't take place, so it's all, I have a self-interest. So, when I recommended the Zohar, I said, and then I said, of course, even if you can't read the Zohar, why should you have the Zohar? I said, everyone in their life either has someone that they become associated with, a friend, a family member, a partner, whatever. How do you know if this is the right one? How do you know if this is the right one? Now, we could use a computer, right? Could use a computer. What's a computer? You feed all the information that is known about the individual, and then you take all of, it could be that you're compatible. He has all the faults, and you're also with all the faults. You make a pair. So that doesn't mean you don't make a pair, right? So you gather all this information into a computer, and a computer can crunch it out maybe after several hours, and then you get your printout, right? And the printout tells you exactly whether it's suitable or it isn't suitable. Of course, it doesn't have that kind of intelligence to create itself yet. Although this fellow Minsky is trying to convince everybody about artificial intelligence, right? In other words, look, man, don't think you're that great. See, he's only going to be the great one because he's going to be the creator of the artificial intelligence. We're all stupid, so you see, he will create the machine that will be smarter than all of humankind. But remember, there's still one man that has to create that super mind, right? So who's going to be more super than the man who created the super? What an ego trip. Wrote him a letter about it. He's going to create the highest form of intelligence. More intelligent than everybody else. But who's creating it? He is. So he must be higher than that. All right? But in any event, why can't we figure all these things out? Because our minds don't have a program. Imagine if you had the mind has billions of neurons that go back and forth much quicker than a computer. Everyone knows that. Mind works a lot quicker. I mean, just sit for a second and meditate, right? How many thoughts come in at that moment? Thousands. Look how fast the mind works. The only trouble is the mind, if it only had a program and it could keep itself within a certain frame, you see, then everything would be fine. But the only trouble is the minute I begin to think about, I'm going to, let's say, pray in the Amidah, and I start the Amidah already, I'm thinking about my business. If I'm not thinking then someone in the business, then I think about that social engagement I get. You know how it goes when you're praying the Amidah. I don't have to tell you. I mean, by the time you finish with the Amidah, it's like you travel 500 miles without even knowing that you were driving the car, right? So I say, if you open up the Zohar in Pashat Yitro, which tells you all about there is to know about people, I say, look at it. You don't even know how to read it. Scan it. That's your program. Goes inside. You'll know already everything. That's what they're trying to do here. If we know about everything, we instill that in our computer. The mind computer. That's why we have to know. That's why the Zohar says you must know. When you know, that is your program. And with that kind of program, which is I believe to be the best program, because this program is geared to get you the kind of light or the kind of dominion that we will have rule over our own life. Okay? So therefore, we want to know, why is there 15? The reason why there are 15, because it represents the Yud and the K. All information exists in the Tetragrammaton, in the upper part of the Tetragrammaton, the Yud and the K. All the troubles that exist in this world exist on the Vav and the K, the last half, which is the 7 of the Tetragrammaton, Zer Anpin and Malchut, the world we exist. So if we can connect with the Yud K, then we have a complete configuration of the Tetragrammaton, and then you have dominion over everything else, says the Zohar, like we know, because Moses knew and had total dominion and total access to the Tetragrammaton. There was nothing that he couldn't do, nothing that could stand in his way. So the purpose here is to unite the Tetragrammaton. We with the Yud K. So therefore there are 15 stages. There are 15 stages. These 15 stages are going to assist us in connecting with the upper part of the Tetragrammaton. Now, I should also mention that before the Seder, meaning before even Pesach begins, there is, I think I have mentioned, but I should mention again, there is the aspect of the matzah, what kind of matzah and so forth. Round matzot are better than squared matzot. Why are round matzot better than squared matzot? If you learn a little Kabbalah, you know that in the end, in a circular, or any circle, there is no beginning and no end, indicating no limitation to your your channel, to the mechanism, to the system you're using. We use squared, you know that it comes to a point. It comes to an end. So it is only quite logical that if you want to improve your systems, take the round matzahs over and above the squared matzahs. Now, if you want to go even further, you use, and this is not prerequisites. We're not talking about, I'm injecting the idea of how you can improve the mechanism you use. But the matzah is the mechanism. It's sufficient. Now we want to say, can I improve the systems? The answer is yes. And sometimes there's almost no limit to how you can improve the systems. But for this evening, we can't go beyond the time allotted. So we'll try to keep to the minimal system. Then you want matzot that are not machine-made, are handmade. Why? Because we believe that the mind has a greater power than even the artificial matzah machine. Of course, that doesn't involve too much computers and too much artificial intelligence, right? But someone doing it by hand obviously is injecting mind power as opposed to mechanical power. Not that the mechanical power invalidates the matzah. I'm not saying that, okay? Then, of course, you know that on the night preceding the Passover, which is in this case Thursday night, there is something called bi'ur chametz. You go around the house, you place 10 pieces of bread, and what you're doing is a physical act of removal of the desire to receive for oneself alone. And we know that there are 10 stages to every entity. 10, whether it is the negative aspects of a structure or the positive, there is always 10. Then, of course, the chametz, you don't have to, you have utensils, and you don't have to throw them out. You can, of course, prepare them to have to be without chametz, which we call the kashering, or the preparation of utensils of all of the year, utensils for the express purpose of the for the Passover. Because the Passover, we have to be very careful, in as much as we don't want any presence of any form of negative energy intelligence which represents the desire to receive for oneself alone. We said now we're trying to get away from that and connect with the total and purity of light, where we'll be in control. No control means any access into the desire to receive for oneself alone. The chametz as it is called, or leavened bread, connects with that aspect of negativity, which is desire to receive for oneself alone. So it should be sold. If you have utensils that you're not going to use, it should be sold. It is sold. Someone here, it could be sold. You establish the center as your channel, and we in turn sell it to a non-Jew. And the non-Jew is not, because he is on such a much higher level of state of consciousness than we are. He doesn't need all of these purifications. He doesn't require all of these necessary holidays, because his desire to receive for oneself alone is not as extremist, is not as severe as the Jews. Of course, that's the plus of the Jew, but that's also the minus of the Jew, that his desire to receive for oneself alone, it far exceeds that of any other nation of the world. So these are some of the essentials that have to be taken care of before Pesach.
Why is there a connection to the upper tetragrammaton? Because
the upper tetragrammaton, the vav and the hey are the lower part, right? Now they are not until the Messiah comes. They are not in a unified circle of circuitry. The yud and the hey are always in a unified form of circuitry, and when you have circuitry, you have constant light.
I was thinking maybe it's because it's such an infusion of light. It's coming directly from the Yud K. And that's what
That is correct. That is correct.
We want to connect directly to that, because
We
that's when it's available.
in our present state of consciousness are not absolutely perfect, are we?
So the Messiah is here on that night.
It is before. It is well. I wouldn't say the Messiah. Once you say the Messiah is here, it means that there should be no rebirth of those people again.
But we're getting a taste of it.
What's that? Well, we get a taste of it. Yes, we are getting an effusion of the upper aspect of the Tetragrammaton, which with that kind of infusion, if it was permanent, now we know the day after Pesach, it disappears. Only those who captured it, but it's only good for a year, incidentally. That's why it's not Mashiach. This infusion of energy that we capture is only good for 1 year. The battery winds down at the end of the year, and you've got to start it all over again the following year.
I have a problem with one thing. What happened to the Erev Rav with the Passover, with the angel effect? Yeah. If the Erev Rav that came in out of Egypt with the Exodus.
No, once this force of the segol, of the 3 points, right? The 3 points on the doorpost was present, the angel of death was vaporized there.
In other words, even the Egyptians could have put it on the door.
What's that?
In other words, your own particular system, as far as the Segol goes, is not necessary.
Let's say yes or no. So what your question essentially is, should all Jews observe Passover?
Exactly.
Should all peoples of the world, including non-Jews, observe Passover? After our lectures, I know of many, many non-Jews who go out to buy tefillin and mezuzot, and they're going to keep Pesach. It happens.
You know what I'm saying?
But since I'm not their rabbi, they would have to go to they should go to their priest and ask him if that's what they should observe.
No, but Arab, if that's the case, okay, and if the non-Jew has not the Segol system, then he cannot.
At the present time, George, let's try to concentrate on how the Jew can achieve it. In fact, if he might achieve it, he might do the job for the non-Jew as well. Because if the non-Jew does the job, it still will not suffice for the Jew. So we have to try to concentrate on that aspect. All right?
Does it mean that day, cosmically, is the best day to exercise our free will?
It is the only day that we have it automatically.
That day we can make resolutions, good resolutions, in other words.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. And that would differ from Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is exactly the opposite. So that day you also want to make good resolutions only because of the way of tshuva. In other words, you repent and so forth and so on. That's not the case over here. All right. Now we come to the kind of Seder plate. The Seder plate is actually, according to the Ari, I can't use this, and I can't give you a. If you can try to zoom in, it's supposed to be a circle. The plate is a circle like this. Oh, do we have one over there? Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Maybe that has it. Now we use the Seder plate, obviously, according to Rabbi Zakluria, the way he understood from the from his study of the Zohar. Let me see this. Okay. If you can zoom into this here, it's quite small. All right, that's pretty good. But you can't really see the words. Can you still come in closer? No. All right. Okay. You will notice that we have two triads. We have 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That is the way the Ari established the Seder plate. Now, what is the Seder plate? What does it mean? It is actually, as we know already from your own studies in Kabbalah, that we are going to make use of the Magen David, the Star of David, which is the instrument by which the Jew can accomplish two aspects. One is to vaporize negative energy intelligence, and at the same time use that same vehicle by which to make connections to the Yud K, to the pure, unadulterated, raw energy. Now, not normally, we should be burnt. You know, if you put your finger in a socket, you can't handle raw energy. We need transformation, certainly not at the power station. So all of these instruments that we're using tonight serves a dual purpose. First, it will act as our missiles for the vaporizing of the negative energy intelligence, because we have to reenact that same scene as the Jews. In other words, you have to accomplish the removal of the negative energy intelligence. It should no longer exist. And then you have to achieve that the light, which heretofore appears as if it doesn't exist unless we have electric bulbs, this system is to restore that light that is there without the assistance of electrical or artificial lighting, to restore that light, that light for us becomes a potent force. The light will act for us in our dominion over all of negative energy intelligences that will arise. Negative energy intelligence means sickness. Negative energy intelligence means loss. Negative energy intelligence means lack in whatever form it might come. So this is the purpose. So the Ari. Oh, okay. Who did this so quickly? The Ari? I don't know. Okay. That's going to help us because this is essential, okay? So we have here, you will notice, which is called the Sfira of Chesed. Sfira of Chesed. It is the Zroa, or the shank bone. Now, it represents several ideas. It's, first of all, it's on the right side, and you know why it's on the right side, because the Sfira of Chesed is on the right side when we're discussing and making use of the Magen David, the Star of David. Now, this Zeroah is a shank bone. And what do we mean by the shank bone? It is to represent the Paschal Lamb. What was the Paschal Lamb? And this is what when we put this down on the plate, it is not like you put it down for traditional reasons, but you in your mind, with your own mind power, and I must say, if you don't exercise that mind power, then you put a piece of bone there. Nothing more than a piece of bone, because it is not the Paschal Lamb. There is no temple, so you don't have the Paschal Lamb. So it is by your mind power usually it is the neck. Now we know why the neck, because the neck represents Mitzrayim, represents the Egyptians in Hebrew, that narrow part, the narrow here indicating less light. Here there's a broadening and then there's a narrowing. Wherever there is narrowing, there is less of a flow. All right? Now, the Paschal Lamb, and the purpose of its complete burning was because we just said the Aries represents the desire to receive for oneself alone. The reason for burning of the Paschal Lamb, the reason for burning was to transfer negative energy into one of positive energy. It was to remove the negative energy intelligence that exists in the Lamb, and then because it no longer contains something negative, it therefore by default becomes positivity. And therefore we establish the shank bone as the Sfirat Chesed. Now, if you don't even recall all that I had just mentioned in the description of Zeroah, at least when you put and you place that Zeroah on the table, say that this represents for you the Sfirat Chesed. It is essential that at least you mention the word Chesed, or Sfirat Chesed. It is then that you have put in part of your program. Now, not all of us are fully equipped to understand programs, but we all know that if you put in the right program, Ben, then you can get out a printout, right? If you don't have the right program, no matter what you try, you won't get out what you want. So while we may not know how the program operates, we may not even know how to create a program. But the fact that we have established that within our program is sufficient. So the word chesed establishes for us in this shank bone that part of the program that is necessary, which is referred to as chesed. Then we have on the left side, which is gevurah. You must mention that word, gevurah, which is Yitzchak. Chesed was Abraham, and this is Yitzchak. And here you put a hard-boiled egg. The hard-boiled egg, which is also called be'ah in Aramaic. It's be'ah, which means desire to receive. Desire to receive. In any circuit of energy, it is essential that you have right and left. One without the other, you never have a circuit of energy. So while negative energy intelligence is bad, Yitzchak was not negative energy intelligence for the desire to receive for oneself alone. All right? So this egg, because of its implication in its name, Biyah, in Aramaic, indicates desire to receive. Therefore, we establish the Sfirat Gevurah, the bottled up energy intelligence, which is there by my saying it's there, becomes manifest in some corporeal matter. That's why I need the corporeal matter.
I don't understand the connection. What characteristics does an egg have that would connect to the desire to receive?
Well, I don't know, but once it's hard boiled, it is only what traditionally they say. There is only one aspect of a corporeal substance that the more you apply heat to it, the harder it gets. Whereas all other metals or physical substances would generally tend to melt or even be vaporized by its fire. Whereas this has an opposite tendency. So you might say, because it has such a desire to receive for self-preservation, like no other thing, that it can withstand any kind of effort to vaporize it. So it indicates self-preservation, the idea of the desire to receive. Like that's what they say, that the egg represents the Jew. That's right.
It is also female, which is left column.
It's female in what sense? Because it's an egg? Because it's an egg. Okay. Yeah, that would be good too. It's an egg. All right, which is the female aspect. Okay. And then you could add one more and say zeroah. That's where it came from the word zera, which means semen. Right? Okay. So, as I said, we can keep broadening the ideas, but they all fit in. And then we have the next one is the maror. The maror. Now, the maror is the bitter herbs. Now, to assume that the reason we eat bitter herbs is because the Jews had it that bad, we just got through saying that the Jews had it great, and they never forgot how great it was that they always wanted to return. So we are not injecting the idea of maror, bitterness. In fact, it is the central column or tiferet, sfirat consciousness. That's right. Okay? Because it means restriction. The most undesirable free will that we might ever achieve is that what we want, we restrict. There is nothing more undesirable, nothing more uncomfortable than to restrict that which we are actively seeking. It runs the paradox. You want it, and now you restrict it. I mean, it just doesn't fit. But if we always observe our bulb, there's your paradox that produces a circuit of energy. The filament acts contrary to the negative pole. The negative pole draws in the energy. And the only way you can have a circuit of energy if suddenly a paradoxical nature comes along with a characteristic of rejection, like the filament, and then you establish a circuit of energy. Therefore, it's called bitter. Why is it bitter? But we will understand that it involves more than just being bitter. But it is bitter because it runs contrary to what we actively seek and desire. And now we're asked that before you can engage a circuit of energy, you must restrict. Now we come to charoset. Now in charoset, the Ari had a combination of 10 items that he had put into this charoset. Now let me see. I remember I figured out only 10, but I think I've got all. I figured only out about 8. I think I've got them all now. Let me just see where I have this. Okay, yes. All right. Generally people take the wine and a little wine and an apple and so forth. But let me give you the ones that were the ones that was used by the Ari. There was ginger and white cinnamon, and there was another aspect that Yossi actually told me in Persian. What's that? Sumbul.
What is it?
What is that, Yossi? What is it?
It's nuts. It's flour. It's a flour or a root.
No.
It's a root or a flour.
But in any event, the reason Yossi bought this from, he bought it in some Persian store because this, you know where it is, Yossi? Would you please bring it out? How long do we have before an intermission? 5 minutes? All right. There are 10. In any event, he put in 10. Most people just put in just to make a little combination called charoset. This is supposedly in commemoration of the cement and so forth, but it has nothing to do with that.
So what does it have to do with?
What it has to do with these 10 items, there are 3 and 7. There are 3 that are connected. Here it is. That's right. This is one of it. Son boltip. Okay, son boltip. No. I don't even know what it is. But son boltip in Persian is exactly the word the Ari uses, and I never could find it. Yes. So, besides cinnamon and ginger, this also is to be used. Now, what it is, we're still not getting any answer. Now, David, it's written in Persian, don't you know?
Rabbi, it looks like roots and flour. This is
Simple in Arabic.
Is what?
Flour seed.
Flower seed?
In Israel, they eat it in terms of, they call it garini.
That's got it.
In Israel, they make it out of garini.
All right. What's that? No.
It has a bark and
It has a bark. That's right. That's right. That's right.
It's a flower.
Marijuana.
It's a flower. Okay. All right. In any event, before we have it in, we'll have a.
The symbol tea. The flower is no. It's the flower that it comes in the spring.
All right. You try to remember, and I'll come back to it. And then we have 7 varieties of fruits, which is grape, figs, pomegranate, dates, apples, walnuts, and almonds. Yes. Okay? These 10 are make up this channel, which is to be used for the Sfirat Netzach. Netzach, which means victory. Now, I once explained that victory means many things to many people. Victory could mean the overrun of one country over another, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the country that has been vanquished ceases to be an enemy. When we discuss victory, we are talking about the complete vaporization. I don't mean vaporization of wiping out people, but a completely harmonious relationship between all different parts. Now, all of these 10, and that's why the Ari chose 10, all of these 10 ingredients represent 10 parts of this universe. in the way of the vegetable kingdom, in every which way. They represent 10. And so we are going to make use of these 10 in clearing out. We're going to see later that the charoset is all going to be part of this activity by which we can completely remove the negative energy intelligence. Now we have here karpas. I will explain each one why it is called by its particular name, but it's called karpas. Now this could be some say petrazilia, some say parsley, but these all in that family. What?
Celery.
Or celery. Yes, the leaves. The leaves. All right? That is, and when we place that on the plate, we have to designate it as the Sfirat Hod. The Sfirat Hod. In other words, we are calling out the internal energy which this particular flower represents, the parsley or the celery leaf, represents an internal energy intelligence known by the sages to be comparable or can act as a channel for that bottled up energy known as Hod. And then we have Chazeret, which is Chassa, which is Roman letters. Now, in Aramaic or even in Arabic, it's called Chassa. Chassa, or Roman letters. That is established and acts as the Sfirat Yesod. Now, Chas means pity, or let's say, what's that? Rachamim, compassion. So it also has its place here by which this channel is going to, throughout the Seder, be our launching pad for everything that we do throughout these 15 various stages. These will always act. We will always be coming back to their participation in the enactment of the 15 stages. All right, and we'll have a short break.